Hello, everyone. Welcome to this year's Milwaukee Arts Board Sustaining Grant Writing Workshop. We're going to get started in just a moment here. I believe you all have joined muted. If you don't mind staying muted until we finish the presentation, you're welcome to put any questions you have in the chat or the Q&A box, and we will work through the questions at the end of the session. I'll just wait another moment before we start looking through the application. All right, so we'll get started walking through the application then. So share to your screen here and let me know if you can't see it or if you're having any access difficulties. What's shared on your screen right now is the application that is currently open for this year's Sustaining Grant Program, and it is due by Monday, March 16th at 4:59 p.m. That is the deadline for a complete application. So please do ensure that your application is submitted through this portal by that deadline. If it is not submitted by that deadline, it will not be considered. We do have a deadline to correct your application. So if there are any errors related to supplemental materials, for example, if you upload perhaps the wrong document to one of the forms, we will give you about a week, just under a week, to correct those materials as we complete our reviews. But this is the most important deadline here, Monday, March 16th at 4:59 p.m. You're always welcome to reach out to us at artsboard@milwaukee.gov. That reaches myself and my colleague Luke Olson. Luke and I staff the Milwaukee Arts Board from the Department of City Development, and you can send any questions you have there, whether it's technical assistance or about eligibility or the guidelines for the award process. So anything you can think of. Right, so you're currently attending this virtual workshop here, and we will be uploading the recording of this workshop to the application. So if you are looking to refer back, or if any of your colleagues would like to watch the recording, that's where you're going to find the link in the next few days. One note about the form site save and return option. It is optional. You do not need to create an account, create login information, but if you would like to start your application and save your progress so that you can return to complete the application, you will need to create a login, and FormSite does require that you create a new login for each separate application. So none of your login information from previous years has been carried over, but you can definitely use that same information to register your account this year. Right, so we'll get into the specifics of where to upload these documents further in the application, but there are a handful of required materials that you must upload to your application in order for your application to be considered complete. That includes a list of your board of directors, as well as their officer status and what their affiliations are. The summary pages of your most recently completed 990, or if you are a small organization and the 990N applies to you, that is also acceptable. You also require a financial statement for your most recently completed fiscal year, and that should include a statement of activity, which is the revenue and expenses, as well as your balance sheet, which is typically your assets and liabilities. You also require your operating budget for your current fiscal year. That should include revenue and expenses, and that must have been approved by your board. Then we also require your IRS letter of tax determination, your articles of incorporation, and your bylaws. And lastly, we require a signature from one of your board officers assuring that everything provided in this application is correct. All right, so a couple of things about the Milwaukee Arts Board. So this grant, the sustaining grant, is part of the Milwaukee Arts Board programs. It is operated each year, staffed by the Department of City Development, and the funding is provided with city budget dollars, as well as support from the Wisconsin Arts Board and pass-through dollars through the NEA. The Arts Board purpose does guide this grant program's primary objectives, and that purpose is to A, promote the development, support, and enjoyment of the arts in this city, B, promote cultural diversity in the artistic life of this city, and C, to promote the formation and growth of artistic projects or programs that are responsive to the needs, cultural history, and experiences of all city residents and of the city's artistic community. Okay, so a little bit about eligibility. And, we find that organizations sometimes are in maybe what would be perceived as a gray area here as far as eligibility. So we're happy to talk through whether or not your organization is eligible to apply before you submit your application. So please reach out to us if this would be your first year applying and if you're not sure that you are eligible. We can also address some of those questions at the end of today's session. So organizations that are eligible to apply must be a nonprofit tax-exempt 501c3 that is in good standing with the IRS and must be incorporated for at least 2 years as of the application deadline. So your 501c3 status must have been received at least by, what would that be, March 16th, 2024. Hard to believe that was 2 years ago already, but that would be the cutoff. And you must have a physical administrative office located in the city of Milwaukee. That cannot be a post office. It must be a physical office. Your organization must have the sole mission or have a unit with the sole mission of the public presentation or production of art or arts programming for the larger community. If it isn't your entire organization, but it's a unit within your organization, that must be a discrete entity that has a separate governing board, separate mission statement, and a separate budget. And then organizations with annual budgets under $6,000 are not eligible to apply, since you must have at least a 1-to-1 match for this grant. You must have completed your 2024 final report if you received a grant in that year, but the good news is everyone who received a grant in that year has completed their final report, so that's not going to be holding anyone back from applying this year. And then lastly, you are not eligible to apply if you are an individual artist, a government agency, a publicly funded educational institution, or a for-profit entity, as you must have a nonprofit status for yourself. You cannot use a fiscal agent for this application. All right, and then what this grant is able to support. In general, this is a sustaining grant, so almost all operating costs are eligible. That would include artistic or administrative staff, facilities, and programming costs. And you are strongly encouraged to use these funds to support artists. And then this is just a list of what this grant isn't able to support. And you will have to click this radio button here to indicate that you have read and you understand the eligibility requirements above it. Anywhere you see this red asterisk, that's going to be a required field. So keep your eye out for those as you work through the application. Okay, so program overview. It's important to note that only one application per organization will be considered. So please do make sure that only one person is completing an application for your organization. The grant period will be from June 1st of this year to May 31st of next year. And the activities that you are seeking grant support for must occur within those dates. Each application will be reviewed by Arts Board staff, so that would be reviewed by Luke and I to ensure eligibility and completeness. And once those reviews are completed and eligibility and completeness is confirmed, then a panel of community members and Milwaukee Arts Board members who are appointed by the Arts Board chair will review and score the applications. As I mentioned at the top, the deadline for the application is Monday, March 16th at 4:59 p.m. And we do encourage you to submit it in advance of that so that we can make sure we are confirming completeness. But if there's anything missing at that time or anything incorrect, I should say, we will give you until that Friday, March 20th at 4:59 p.m. to correct any errors in those document uploads. Right, so as I mentioned, each application is reviewed by a panel. And everyone who applies will be sent the information to join that panel to hear your application reviewed. There is linked in within this application the score sheet that will be used for the application. So take a look and understand how your application will be scored and how that process will unfold. Once the panel meets, all of the final scores are submitted by the panelists, and those are turned into an overall ranking of all of those complete eligible applications. And in May, the Arts Board will meet to consider those rankings from the panel, which are considered recommendations from the panel to the Arts Board as far as who will be receiving a grant. The way that that works is the Arts Board has a certain amount of funding that can be awarded for this grant, and they will award, starting with the highest ranked application and working through that list until all the grant funds are exhausted. And they may award a partial grant towards that end of the ranking list to make sure that all available grant funds are allocated. You'll be notified either way if you are receiving a grant or not, sometime typically at the end of May or in June. And starting in July, the grant agreements will be sent out to those who are receiving a grant this year. Final reports. So if you received a 2025 sustaining grant, you'll receive that final report link on June 1st of this year, and it will be due to June 30th. And there will be a similar time frame for 2026 grantees where you will receive your final report link June 1st, 2027, and it will be due June 30th, 2027. Right, so we're getting close to the end of the guideline and process section, but it is important to note that the grant amount is determined by your organizational budget. So we take that list once the panel scores all of the applications and all of those scores are turned into rankings. Then we take that ranked list, and each organization is eligible for a grant based on their budget, and that is determined by the projected income for their current fiscal year. So if you are funded, you would be eligible for, if your budget is under $100,000, you'd be eligible for a $3,000 grant. And if your budget is over $100,000 for a year, your grant would be $6,000. Again, so we'll work through that list of rankings and award grants at those amounts based on the budget until funding is exhausted. The first grant payment will be made in 75% of the grant amount, and that will be after the grant contract is received, and the final grant payment is made after the final report is submitted and approved. Right, and then we do have a conflict of interest statement. If you're interested in taking a look at that, we can provide you that in writing if requested. But essentially, any Arts Board member or panel member that has a conflict with one of the applicants will not review, score, or comment on whichever organization they have a conflict with. Right, so with all of that, we're going to go into then the general information for the application. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get to them after we finish going through this application. So this first section is your general organizational information. We ask for the organization's name, website, and the address of your physical office. That must be in the city of Milwaukee. We ask if it is your first time applying with us, and if it is, we will require that you upload a copy of the current 2024 version of the W-9. If it is not your first time applying with us, but your address has changed since the last time you applied for this grant, we will also ask you to provide an updated W-9. But as you'll see, if your address hasn't changed and this isn't your first time applying with us, that means we already have your mailing address set, and so you do not need to submit another W-9. We also understand that some organizations have a mailing address that is different from their physical office, and so we do give you an option here to complete what your mailing address is. If it's the same as your physical office address, then we just ask you to enter that same address in for your mailing address section. Right. We also ask you if you know what aldermanic district your office is located in to select it from this drop-down menu. If you don't know, you're welcome to go to this link here and check it out. There's also a lot of great information about voting at that link. The next section is contact information, both for the applicant and for the executive director. We also ask for your organization's kind of a general email address or a backup address in the case that within the grant period there's staff turnover. We want to make sure that we can still reach your organization to complete that final report and receive the remaining 25% of your grant. We also ask for your EIN number or your TIN, the date of your organization's incorporation, and your organization's mission statement, number of full-time and part-time staff, and your most recently completed fiscal year start and end. Ask for your organization's income and expenses from your last completed fiscal year, and then an explanation if expenses exceed income, maybe why, or what plan you have to ensure that the organization can continue to operate with that discrepancy. Then we ask for information about your current fiscal year, including your projected income and your projected expenses for the current fiscal year. These numbers do have to match what your board approved as far as your operating budget. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the figure that will determine the grant amount that you are eligible for. Okay, so that's going to be the general information. And then we do have a handful of narrative questions. This year, each question does have a 1,500 character limit. We ask that you explain how your organization, how the programming of your organization works towards those purposes of the Milwaukee Arts Board. So we ask you to please explain and provide an example of how your organization promotes the development, support, and enjoyment of the arts in the city. We also ask you to please explain and provide an example of how your organization promotes cultural diversity in the artistic life of this city. We ask you to please explain and provide an example of how your organization promotes the formation and growth of artistic projects or programs that are responsive to the needs, cultural history, and experiences of all city residents and of the city's artistic community. And lastly, we ask you, how will your organization know it achieved the goals of the ordinance list, those ordinance points listed above, including methods that you will use to evaluate your programming? Those 4 questions are each going to be scored by the panelists, and they're each worth 20% of your overall score. So it's important that you, provide as thorough of an example and explanation as you can. And imagine a panelist that has never heard of your organization and isn't familiar with the work that your organization does. You really want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, so to speak, with those questions. And then lastly, the required supplemental materials. Here is where you will upload the list of board of directors. When you select this choose file, it will open up your kind of file finder within your computer, and that is where you can select what you're choosing to upload. I believe you could also have that file open and drag it into this field. So where we ask for your 990, that should be your most recently filed 990 not a draft, but most recently filed. And typically it would be your 2024 990, and that is the date that's listed on the top of that form. And just to level set across organizations, if it is not labeled as the 2024 990, which, for some folks, they've already completed their 2025, and so they can indicate that it's their 2025. For some folks, it's their 2023 990 because they received an extension that allows them to file that 2023 late. So we just ask for an explanation if it is not labeled as your 2024 990, so that panelists can understand kind of across applicants and level set. Then we ask for your financial statements for your most recently completed fiscal year. So, for most people, that would be the calendar year 2025. For some, as long as it's the most recently completed fiscal year, if your fiscal year isn't the calendar year, that's totally acceptable. But please make sure that you include your statement of activity and your balance sheet. Then ask that you upload your operating budget for your current fiscal year. And again, that must be approved by your board. And this year we are asking that you indicate that it has been approved by the board if it has been. And then lastly here, we ask that you upload your IRS letter of tax determination, articles of incorporation, and your bylaws. We have 3 separate sections here to ensure that folks submit all 3 of these documents. If you have them combined in part or in whole, please just upload those to each of the boxes then, because you do have to submit something into these boxes. Right, and then we are getting towards the end here. So this is the section that your board officer is signing off on. So please have them read the section here to make sure that they are agreeing to each of these points. And that they are also certifying that, to the best of their knowledge, the information contained in this application is true and correct. And then, you can use this. This is really just a template. If you'd like to use it, you can also upload a separate document that they have signed off on. So that's really up to you, whatever's easiest on your end in this box here. Right, and then that brings you to the end of the application, which you can either save progress if you've logged in or hit submit. And if you've completed all of the fields, it will let you submit. There's not an option once you submit to make any corrections or addition to your application. But if you've already submitted your application and it's before that deadline of March 16th, please email us at artsboard@milwaukee.gov, and we are happy to make any changes or corrections to your application that you might need. Right, so with that, that is the full application and guidelines, but we are open to any questions that folks might have in general or specifically about their application at this time. And if you want to raise your hand, or hopefully you're able to unmute. If not, I can unmute you from my end. So thank you all for coming today. Yes, Cassie. Okay, Cassie, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself, but what I'm going to do is, I think, okay, great. You're able to.
I did, sorry.
Awesome. No, you're great. That's good. I'm never sure what permissions folks might have in Teams. So go right ahead, Cassie.
Yes, so my organization is a fiscally sponsored project, but our fiscal receiver is interested in applying to support the program that we're operating. Is that qualified within the, so if our sponsored or our sponsor or fiscal sponsor is applying to support something that we're doing, is that okay within the rules of the grant?
Would you be willing to share who your fiscal sponsor is, or who the applicant would be?
Create Wisconsin.
Okay, so they are not located in the city of Milwaukee, so that would not be eligible, unfortunately. Okay, it would have to be an organization that's eligible to apply.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, Abby, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting this information session. First and foremost, my question is, I always compare our last year's application to this year's. I just want to confirm that the questions ask us to describe what will occur in our upcoming season, and the question about how funds will be used have been removed from this year's application.
Yes, we, so each year we look at kind of the best way to restructure and really minimize what we're asking folks while making sure that we're maximizing the information and the usefulness of the information. So we did decide to remove that question, how will you use the funds? Because, you know, frankly, we don't track that for this program. We know that the grant amounts are small and that applicants have plenty of operating costs that they could allocate our grant funds to if awarded. So yes, the question, some of the questions from previous year's applications have been removed just to try and simplify the application. And then we've also really tried to align more directly what the panel members are scoring the applications on directly with fields in the application. So that's been the process, but we're just looking to, again, streamline, simplify. What you're putting in is exactly what the panelists are reviewing and scoring.
No, that's awesome. Hey, a shorter application. I'm never going to complain about that.
Exactly, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for your question, Abby. Yeah, Joelle, go ahead if you can unmute yourself.
Newer grant writer, but I was wondering if the Milwaukee Arts Board considers what was Trump's banned words, soft banned words for their applications.
What do you mean by considers?
I know that some foundations and grantors do not consider his banned words and others do.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have any restrictions on how you can describe your programming. I don't
Okay,
know if
that's
okay,
awesome.
great. Thank you. Any other questions? You're always welcome to reach us. Like I said, artsboard@milwaukee.gov. That reaches both Luke and I, and we can take a look and chat with you. And if needed, we can always schedule a call as well, based on your question and if we need to discuss further. Right. And if anyone's watching this recording, also applies to you as long as it's before March 16th. Just reach out to us if you have any questions or need technical assistance on your application. You can reach us at artsboard, ARTSBOARD @milwaukee.gov. Thanks, y'all. I'll stay on for a minute or two in case there's any questions. But if not, then I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day and thank you for joining us.